Madam Speaker, the Road Traffic Act was passed in 2018 by both houses of Parliament with the support of both sides of the House. And was can I be allowed to continue, please? And was crafted with the input of a joint select committee that sat in 2014 and heard from multiple stakeholders, including the Jamaica Association of Transport Operators and Owners, JATU, the Insurance Association of Jamaica, the U-Drive Rent-A-Car Association. The act is aimed at ensuring that we have safer roads, protecting our children, pedestrians, drivers, all of us that use the road, and reducing our road fatalities. Last year, over 490 persons perished on our roads as a result of collisions. The Act provides the Minister of Transport under Section 110 with broad powers to make regulations under this Act. The Road Traffic Act 2018 was brought into effect on February 1 of this year, 2023. Since then,
recordings just got better. Hey, it's Dana from StreamYard. I'm so excited to announce that local recordings are now available on StreamYard. Have you ever done a recording where your guest just had terrible internet issues? They were blurry, they were freezing, you could almost hardly hear them. Well, with local recordings from StreamYard, you'll be able to download a perfect quality
without compromising on the safety and the security of our road operations. One of the most debated aspects is the use of child restraint systems. The regulations place the responsibility on the driver of a vehicle to ensure that every child is conveyed in a prescribed child restraint system under Section 73 of the Act. The protective devices legislation that was introduced in 1999 and included in the Road Traffic Act 1938 in or about 2001 required the use of seatbelt and child restraint systems, but was not previously strictly enforced. Madam Speaker, the safety of our children on our roads is an area of high priority, whether they are walking, on a cycle, or in a motor vehicle. Road fatality statistics reveals that on average, children under the age of 14 years represent just under 3% of the total number of fatalities over the past 6 years. Too many fatal collisions involve persons not using suitable restraints in their vehicles. Although wearing a seatbelt is a simple action that can secure your own safety in an adverse event. Furthermore, children are often not properly secured, with reasons of cost and convenience being most often cited. The legislation seeks to mandate actions to protect children as best as possible from the effects of a collision. We are, however, aware that in some cases, a compromise has to be made when the practical realities are taken into account. The realities of our public passenger transportation system and how it operates will place an undue burden on parents whose children need to travel in public transportation, whether accompanied by an adult or not. The risk of the inability to access transportation services may exceed the risk associated with travel without using a child restraint system. And in this regard, the rules applicable to public transport vehicles will have to be less stringent than those for private vehicles. In response to the foregoing, a regulation is to be inserted, making reference to the type of child restraint required for the conveyance of children based on age and size in different types of vehicles. The child seat requirement will be a table added to the 13th schedule to set out, that is of the regulations, to set out what is required for different categories of vehicles based on the different age, size ranges, and different types of restraints. Under the updated requirements, in the case of licensed public passenger cars or buses, children under 1 year old must be restrained by an adult. 1 to 3 year old may travel with no restraint or be restrained by an adult. 3 to 6 years old may travel without restraint, restrained by an adult or a lap belt. 6 to 9 years old may travel without restraint or with a lap belt. Children over 9 years old may travel without restraint with a lap belt or a 3-point seat belt. Only children who are of the weight and size to use an adult seat belt are permitted to travel in the front passenger seat. In addition, where an adult is restraining a child, the adult should not be in the front. Children under 1 year old are to be restrained by an adult in all forms of transport. All other children must be transported using appropriate restraint based on their size and weight. Guidelines have been set out so persons can determine what kind of restraint is applicable for different categories. In licensed taxis and buses, children are allowed to travel without restraint, but where a lap belt is available, it should be used. If a child is of the size to use an adult belt, this may be used if available. In all instances, the driver must wear a seatbelt, whether operating privately or as public passenger vehicles. Madam Speaker, the implementation of the RTA 2018 and its regulations have evoked much needed response from our stakeholders. And we as a government have a responsibility to create laws that benefit the people of the nation's overall well-being. We have heard the feedback from the people and are prepared to take into consideration all the variables. However, it must be clear that there will be no compromise on the intent of the law and the safety of our people. We have always been a government that welcomes dialogue at the discussion table, and this has not changed. Using the regulations is the quicker way to achieve the objective of embracing public passenger vehicles and their passengers. We welcome any feedback as we work to build a better Jamaica. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, we on this side welcome the statement and the proposed amendments by the Minister of Transport. But, Madam Speaker, you know, it's the first time that I've been in this house since this government has been in power that they have tried to cast blame and said that all of us should take responsibility. But let me remind the minister of in his conclusion, where he says, and we as a government have a responsibility. Because I remember, Madam Speaker, both in the debate for the Road Traffic Act and for even the regulations itself, that we on this side made multiple recommendations for amendments in different aspects of the act in the debate, both here in the lower house and in the upper house, which was not accepted. Which was not accepted.
Madam Speaker, the point of order. Point of order, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker,
Madam Speaker, the
I
point
see
of
no
order.
reason for me to yield.
Madam Speaker, the point of order. You know I'm going to stand up on it. You know I'm going to do it. Madam Speaker, I think the member is misleading the House. The matter at hand relates to seat belts. The statement related exclusively to the issue of children in public passenger vehicles and child restraints. The opposition member is seeking to conflate to make it seem to the House.
Madam Speaker, on a point of order, Madam Speaker.
That their amendments had to do with child restraints that they suggested. They offered no amendments regarding child restraints. So he cannot stand there and mislead the House and the public to make it seem or to extricate them from the passage of that law.
Madam Speaker, as the members attempt to try and just disrupt, and you're allowing him to disrupt, because I spoke of many suggestions for amendment. I never did single out child seat, man. Look here now. And that
I am allowing the member. You're not even addressing me. You're speaking across the aisle.
Madam Speaker, you're much more beautiful to look at than the member over there that is disturbing. Madam Speaker, there comes a time, because I saw in the press release last week where they are trying to imply that it was a former Minister of Transport, that it is coming from that time, when we have accepted that it has been in law from even before that. But it was this administration that had the opportunity in 2018 when they retabled. That if they wanted to, they could have changed it. So you can't be pointing fingers when things go bad. Madam Speaker,
members of the House, the minister, members
Madam
of the
Speaker.
House, the minister rose in a statement to address a particular aspect of the law, and the member on the opposition is speaking. The crosstalk is not necessary, and in response, I thought that when a statement is made in this House, the response relates to the statement. The statement before the House relates to the regulation as it speaks to the necessity for a child restraint. Please allow the member from the opposition to make his point in relation to the restraint, which is what the minister addressed this afternoon.
Madam Speaker, the point.
The minister's general point, apart from that specific regulation, was in relation that his government stands open to discussions. So your response will relate to the statement he made to the restraint of the child thing, and if you wish to respond to his comment that his government is open to discussions.
Madam Speaker, if you have a copy of the minister's statement, if you refer to the first page, I'm responding to the minister's statement speaking about the responsibility of all of us inside here. And I'm just clarifying, Madam Speaker, that the minister in his own press release last week referred to the former minister, and without taking responsibility. So for the country to understand that the administration had an opportunity to change it if they had wished. That's all the point I'm making, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, this in itself, Madam Speaker, is giving confirmation, as I've repeatedly spoken about, the public education. Because if public education was done in the way that we expected public education to take place, then matters like this could have been dealt with a long time ago. But also a wider conversation with the society, Madam Speaker. Because yes, the act and the regulations were passed years ago. But as I have mentioned before, that there are some drastic changes in this, and we have to blame ourselves too, because many of what is now in the new act was already in law before, but was not enforced. That many people, many members of the public didn't even know that you needed that on the toll road, that a wrecker was the only contract in the business to be able to remove vehicles. Many persons didn't know certain aspects of the law. So to say that they should have known, Madam Speaker, is unfair and insensitive. Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker.
Member, I just want to break and say all these regulations and all these acts that are passed, they are passed with us all sitting in Parliament, or all
Madam
should be
Speaker.
sitting here, both opposition as well as government. So we are all responsible.
Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker. Yeah. Madam Speaker, just a suggestion, Minister, that in the schedule that you have stated here. So, Madam Speaker, again, let me give our support on this side to the amendments that are being proposed. But that also, Hey, see, you came all with your ears plugged because I started out by saying that. But just to add, Madam Speaker, just to ensure that there's no children of this age in the public transport, that even if they're on their own private business, that they are not, that they do not travel in the front seat of these vehicles. Yes. That has to be at least said in the amendment. No, it spoke about it, about those who are older. We're saying those that are much younger, that they're, or even in the lap of an individual in the front seat. Village lawyer. So, Madam Speaker. Village lawyer. Madam Speaker, again, we on this side also want to ensure that we don't lose any more lives to any further carnage on the road. Because, you know, any life loss is one that affects not only the family, but affects the wider society. And last year we saw a record number of deaths on the road. And it is a responsibility for all of us that even those who are using the roads, Madam Speaker, have a personal responsibility. Has a personal responsibility in how it is that they traverse in these public passenger vehicles, in their own vehicles, and how it is that they utilize the roadway. Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, outside of the issues of Road Traffic Act and its regulations, you have the Transport Authority Act, which we were told we were waiting on the regulations to bring the Transport Authority Act. Because when you look at the regulations, Madam Speaker, it speaks to public transport, it speaks to seating in the regulations. It didn't speak to any safety harness or any safety features in the regulations itself. Then you have the Transport Authority Act, which will be speaking to public transport. We probably need to look at how it is that we tidy up some of the issues with public transport. The events of the last few weeks, Madam Speaker, have taken away the focus on public transport itself. Public transport contributes about 5% to GDP. It's huge. It deals with the productivity. It deals with the movement of goods, not only people. It is an important part to our economy. And to where public transport is concerned, there needs to be a national dialogue in how it is that we provide a modern public transport system, not only for those in the KMTR, but also in rural parishes. So, Madam Speaker, we on this side, we're open to that dialogue. We are not against the Road Traffic Act, but we voiced our concerns during the debate. And I can assure you, Madam Speaker, many of those recommendations that we made on this side were not taken. Hence why we are saying there ought to be good public education prior to and consultation to. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, please don't get some order in the House from prevent the member over there from being his usual disruptive way. Madam Speaker, you made a point. You made a point, Madam Speaker, that the matter brought by the Minister of National Security on the safety of the children in the transport was the focus, but it's part of the Road Traffic Act that why we are having this discussion. And the minister also made the point that further to the response publicly why he's here this afternoon. And we welcome your attempt to ameliorate the problem which has been highlighted and the impact it's having in the society. But in that context, Madam Speaker, in the discussions in the Road Traffic Act, there's another item, Minister, that I would like you to consider addressing while you are doing this one. And it relates to the penalty or fine for the lights on the motor vehicle. I have always maintained that while persons must make sure that the lights are working, there are some things that all of us don't have control over. Those are electrical devices that it can be working this minute. So you leave out your house, because I remember in the discussion, the police officers made the point that you have a responsibility to check the lights before you leave home. Fine. But the fact of the matter, Minister, it can be working when you drove out. And 5 minutes down the road, it's gone. It's not fair for persons like those, any such persons, to be penalized at the level they are being penalized for such circumstances. The alternative proposal, Minister, is that when that occurs, the person be given a warning ticket. And this happens in other jurisdictions. Yeah, we're talking about making a good, bad situation better. Give them a warning ticket. Specify 5 days or whatever time it is that they must correct it. Because at the time when the discussion were taking place, we never had the ticketing system that could provide real-time information when the police stop you on the road. That has changed. Once a ticket is written, it can go into that central clearinghouse where the information is there. So if you drive down the road 15 minutes time and a police stop you, he can immediately check independently and verify that you were warned. And so he doesn't have to give you a ticket. Minister, our people must not feel that their government, the state, is being unfair to them. We have an obligation to be reasonable and to be practical in instances like these. So I crave your indulgence, Minister, that while you're doing the seatbelt issue, make us just fix that same time. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, when a government brings legislation to Parliament and passes it, the government must accept responsibility for the contents of that legislation. It has a majority and it uses a majority to pass. There are many pieces of legislation that come here. Members on this side may express concerns or a dislike of a specific provision, may point out potential adverse consequences if it is enacted in that form. but at the same time, support the legislation as a whole as a step forward. So, for example, in the recent firearms legislation, when it was being debated in here, I pointed out that I had real reservations about the impact of discontinuing the applicability of the guilty plea mechanism in the Criminal Justice Administration Act to firearms offenses under Part 2 of the new Firearms Act. The impact that would have on court backlog by tending to ensure that many more cases go to trial, and the impact on the prison system of these very long mandatory minimum sentences. I didn't vote against the Firearms Act because I recognized Jamaica needed to modernize its firearms legislation. But that doesn't mean that I support every aspect of it. The big point here, though, is a government, whether the bill originated with a previous government or not, when they decide to move forward with legislation, that is their decision. And they must own it for better or for worse. They are married to it. Now, on this child seat issue, Section 73 of the Road Traffic Act 2018 prohibits a child under the age of 12 riding in a vehicle unless there's a prescribed child restraint system in place. That provision existed previously to 2018, as I understand it. It was not enforced. With the new act coming into effect on February 1, with a very inadequate public education effort on the part of the government, for which the minister responsible for information bears full responsibility, though he tries to pretend as if he's acquitted his responsibility adequately, which he has not.
Which point of order?
Another point of order. No. He's misleading the House, Madam Speaker. I did not bear full responsibility for the public. Allow me to finish. I do not have responsibility for the public education of the Road Traffic Act 2018 because I was not even in Parliament when the act was passed. They are the ones who sat on the committee and sat here and passed it. I was not here. I was not here.
Member. Members. Really, members. Member, you're sitting right beside your leader and carrying on like that. I cannot, no, I'm not going to allow you, not with your opposition on spokes, on person on finance, right beside you, behaving like that. But, yes, but while you're having a friendly exchange, your leader is on the floor. No, but you continued while the leader, that's why he sat.
No, that's totally out of order, Madam Speaker. Totally out of order. Two members came in a feed.
Minister, please. We can get up. Listen, the behavior in Parliament. Member, Minister, you cannot, and I do not expect you as a Minister of Information to sit and do that. It is not correct. Two wrongs don't make a right, and I don't expect you to do that. Please. He was not finished speaking. He wasn't finished. You have to let some things pass you. I can't hear. I did not even hear what the leader of the opposition said. I cannot hear.
Please don't. It's all right. Madam Speaker, if I may be permitted to continue, because Madam Speaker, if I may be permitted to continue. Oh.
I've heard what the minister has said, but I cannot rule on something that I did not hear. And it goes to the fact that the talking and the crosstalk at the level is taking place between both sides is not allowing me to hear what is being said. And no, I'm speaking. Hold a minute. Minister, I am asking all of us as members of this parliament to just remember that we are on display and nobody, I'm speaking and you are still speaking. You have not learned first time, member. I'm addressing you and I find it very rude the way you are behaving. I am talking about the fact that on both sides of the aisle, our behavior has not been good. And when it is that the Gleaner writes, we all take offense. I'm asking you, and we have students in the gallery, please.
Madam Speaker, in that you didn't, and not just hear me out, please, Madam Speaker, I know my right in this house, in that you didn't hear what the leader of the opposition said. Can I assist you? Yes. Madam Speaker, may I say something, Madam Speaker? In that you didn't hear what the leader of the opposition said, can I assist you in what he said?
I am correct. I am not going to rule on something that I did not hear.
Do you want to call an Anzad?
I will not do that. And please, and I'm going to say something now. The fact is that if the behavior of the parliament had not dropped to the low it has dropped this evening, I would have been able to hear everything. So when somebody is on their feet speaking, if you have something to say, if it is a point of order, you get up and say you have a point of order and you indicate what your point of order is on the other person. If you don't cross talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As I was saying, Section 73 of the Road Traffic Act 2018 makes it a criminal offense for a driver to have a child under 12 in the vehicle when it's being operated, unless there's a prescribed child restraint system. That's in the law currently. It has been in the law for some time. It was not previously enforced. The government brought the Road Traffic Act 2018 into force on the 1st of February, which is a week or so ago. Drivers of public passenger vehicles began to be ticketed because they were transporting children. Many children across Jamaica rely on taxis and other public transportation to get to school and back. It created a big problem, and there was an outcry on the matter. I'm glad that the minister with responsibility for transport has announced an intention to introduce a new schedule into the regulations. I believe it's Schedule 13, with a regime dealing with that. The regime as outlined is a very liberal regime, and I dare say it should be accepted by the broad population if it is made clear as to its impact and there's a proper public education system effort behind it, along with the other aspects of the new law which have changed the way people are expected to behave, which we have not had adequately so far. But in the meantime, I don't know when this amendment is going to be made. My understanding is that it will have to come to the House for approval. Well, why did the regulations come to the House in the first place then?
So, I'm not, do you want me to? I don't know, only if you,
Yeah, my understanding is that those regulations are subject to affirmative resolution.
no, so,
Member,
point of
just to
clarification.
clarify.
yeah.
Yes.
The Road Traffic Act indicates the areas under which regulations would require affirmative resolution. This would not be one of those areas. It has specific areas that it requires. So the regulations that would come would not require any sort of affirmative resolution, so they would not have to come to the House. So the minister can make these regulations by order and have them gazetted, hence a much quicker process.
Thank you, member.
That's good news. I don't know what that timeline is, Minister. I'm interested for you to give us some commitment as to when that will happen. Huh? Mm-hmm. You haven't indicated in your presentation. You have not said in your presentation when you expect those regulations to be made and gazetted. Yeah. Yeah, so I'd ask if you could give us an indication of when that will be done. In the meantime, Section 73 in its current form is problematic. There's been a video circulating of a senior police officer responsible for traffic indicating that the police are being expected to exercise their discretion while this matter is being sorted out and so on. But in the meantime, taxi operators have that liability if they carry a child and they don't have a child restraint system. Many countries in the world with modern public transportation systems do not require a child restraint system for public passenger vehicles carrying children. And indeed, under this regime, which has been announced, which is not yet in effect, but hopefully will come soon, the reality is that if one reads it, it says 1 to 3 years old may travel with no restraint or be restrained by an adult. 3 to 6 years old may travel without restraint or restrained by an adult or a lap belt. 6 to 9 may travel without restraint or with a lap belt. Children over 9 may travel without restraint or with a lap belt. So this regime basically allows for a no restraint system for public passenger vehicles. I have brought a bill, which I'm seeking the leave of the House shortly, when we get to that stage on the agenda, to introduce, which would amend Section 73 of the Act so that the criminal offense of driving without a child restraint system, and where you get a fine of $5,000 plus 4 demerit points if you are the driver, would not apply to public passenger vehicles. And that, I brought it here just because I made that commitment last week amidst the chaos that was caused. Because the truth of the matter is, I don't think anybody focused on that specific provision because it had not been enforced before. And it was not problematic before. But with the advent of the new act and the zeal around establishing that the new act meant a new departure from what went before, the police were assiduously enforcing it, and it created a huge problem with children being stranded, etc., etc. So, Madam Speaker, I would ask the Minister if he would please indicate when he expects these regulations to be in place, i.e. signed by him and gazetted, so that they become, and assuming that the Minister Green is correct, that they do not have to come here for approval, then that would make it a quicker process. So, Minister, thank you.
It's a question, Madam Speaker. The ministers indicated, yes, he has indicated, Madam Speaker, certain age groups, 1 to 3, 3 to 6, etc. I think it's very important for us to be clear in this House. How will we be able to determine the police, that is, or the operator, whose responsibility will it be to determine the age group? It's very important. So it is important, Minister. So could you give us some clarification on how that will be done?
Can I, Madam Speaker, on the same issue, I have heard the issue of age. I just have a concern, and this is borne by my own personal experience. You have children who are below the age of 12, but who are physically well developed and big. And I can use my own son as an example, he's 8, 2 years ago, he couldn't sit in a child seat. How do you deal with a situation where you have children who physically can't hold in a child seat or even in a booster seat because they're just physically too big, and you would be breaking the law by carrying those children outside of the child seat?
I think basically the same sort of questions in relation to age have been placed. It's age and size that has.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank the members of the opposition for their responses and their observations. And I just want to say that
Questions came from your side and the minister is trying to answer.
Yes.
You should try and listen.
I just want to say that the regulations, Madam Speaker, in relation to the amendments which I have announced today, will be carried out this very week, And to also let everyone know that we are giving a 3-month period where other issues that will no doubt arise will all lead over 3 months. Within 3 months, we intend to make whatever additional amendments that need to be made to the Act will be done to the Act as well. And I just want to say as well that I agree that the public education program has to be stepped up much more aggressively. Yes, I'm agreeing with that. I am agreeing with that. It has to be stepped up, aggressively. And we intend to do that. Thank you very much. And I just want to say that in all of this is not about us seeking now to, trying to claim credit across from one another, right? This amounts now to the safety and security of our children. And we must put that at the front and make sure that, and remind our drivers of public passenger vehicles that when they are driving, whether minibuses or taxis, cars, they must remember that they're the children that are in that car. They must be more careful to make sure that they are protecting our children that are the future of our country. I just also want to say that when it comes to the question of weight and height indicators, if a child is big enough to use a full belt, then we encourage and make sure that that child uses that belt. And I think it's important that we use this opportunity to remind public passenger vehicles and taxis, have seat belts in your car. If you don't have them, install them. Have them on the back seats as well. Put 3 seat belts on the back seats, the right, the left, and the middle, along with your seat belts on the front seats. This is not, when it comes to public safety and the safety of our children, this is not politics. This is not us trying now to gain anything above one another. This is to protect our children, protecting them for the future of Jamaica. And I just want to say to the opposition, whether you gave your suggestions now or you want to give it later, right? I am ready to listen to what you have to say, because this is very important. And I'm going to look, as you have requested, on the issue of the penalties for lights on vehicles. And because I agree with you that lights could go off at any time and a warning ticket should be considered. So I want to thank you for your observations. Yes.
Madam Speaker, thank you very much. And thank you very much, Minister, for understanding what is happening on the road. But I have 2 questions. One, in regards to cars, motor vehicles, when importing, we must make sure that we don't import these vehicles without retrofitting proper seat belts, because it makes no sense. We tell them to do it and they can't do it, because we have been importing vehicles in this country that have no seatbelt, probably have at the front, and you look at the back, there is none. But there's another question I would want to find out. For those persons who were ticketed, in regards to the breach that we are now discussing in terms of the seatbelt, will they be nullified?
Yeah, the 3 months.
I haven't said anything much on this, but I must tell you that the issue, it seems to me that the issue of child safety is a real one. I was just wondering about the data that the government has or should have and perhaps have. Is it possible for, and I assume that the initial position taken by the government was perhaps based upon the data, the evidence that it was viewing or the technical people were viewing. Because I'm wondering if that data is so compelling, why, and we have the data, instead of simply giving in to the outcry, why don't you do the right thing, which is perhaps look at a way in which we can meet, because one of the concerns is the cost to the consumer and the user, right? One of the concerns is a cost to the consumer, right? One of the concerns is a cost to. I said one of the ministers trying to hear Desmond. Yeah. One of the concerns you mentioned is the cost to the parents, right? That this should impose a cost to some persons who can't afford it. If the issue is affordability, might the government consider then addressing the issue with the cost by subsidizing the cost up to deal with the safety issue. If the issue of safety is paramount and it's borne out by evidence, is not a way to deal with it, to address, to subsidize the cost to at least those who can least afford it? Is that something that the ministry has looked at as an alternative other than simply resiling from the issue in totality? Could that be considered?
Member, before the
You may want to
minister
consider that.
rises, member, certainly the issue of the safety of our children cannot be driven by data, because the safety of every child is important. And when we travel abroad, we know what the rules are, and those rules are placed for the safety of all children. Therefore, when it is that you have vehicle, if it happens to be imported, doesn't have a seatbelt, we all have a duty to look after the safety of our children. No, member before you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Just one question to the minister, especially with the introduction that you made in wrapping up about in the next 3 months and using that period to identify some of the issues. The question I want to ask is, what would the JCF be expected to do during that period? I know that they are a set who would normally tell you they don't like to act off discretion. They want to know that there are clear laws. But I believe since you have given that 3-month period, which I think is good, you need to make it clear exactly what is expected to happen in those 3 months as it relates to breaches.
Madam Speaker, as a rural girl, deep rural girl. Yeah, man, deep rural. It has got, you have gotten better. Okay, I'll vote for you next time. All right. So, but, Madam Speaker, the Minister of Local Government is obstructing the proceedings of the House, and I seek your protection at this time. But as a rural girl, no, I'm
on both sides of the aisle, I have not been able to successfully give protection to anybody this evening because of the general
I'll
behavior.
make my question quick, Madam Speaker. I grew up in a community where taking your produce to market was a great part of how people made their living. And I don't know about so changes, but we can't tell about women. And the truth is, while I think we need to modernize transportation, which takes our people from source to market, what still exists is still a market truck. And that market truck takes with it produce along with marketeers, the vendors. The law prescribes that there be a separation from your goods. So the truck should carry the goods and you have to take a separate mode of transportation. That's what it prescribes right now. I'm asking that when you're looking, look back at this, because practically we're not there right now. Ideally, it's perhaps where we need to go. But I think as a government and as a people, we have to be sensitive to the needs of our people right now and where we are at the limitations that exist. So I'm asking to revisit that one. The market people, they really can't identify enough a load of cane. By the time it reached the Spanish town from Brownsville, some of the cane are missing, and you can't tell who take what cane and which cane was crawfish from which was white cane. So I'm just saying, if we can allow for it to continue until we have gotten to a place where we can properly determine how it is that we'll be able to transport them both and keep their goods safe and keep them safe as well. Thank you.
Minister, just one point of clarification in relation to how these regulations will be promulgated. Section 110 of the Act says that regulations which provide for custodial sentences are subject to affirmative resolution. That provide for custodial sentences in them are subject to affirmative resolution. The regulations that were brought into effect along with the Act, very voluminous, have for approval and to the Senate, and they were approved. Are you saying that if you're amending regulations that have custodial sentences in them, you can amend them without bringing them to Parliament? Is that what you're saying? Because the Schedule 13 is going to be an amendment to the regulations, as I understand it. Yeah. So I'm just asking that because that seems counterintuitive to me.
Madam Speaker, let me say that this is not a process that is magical and everything will be done by the snap of a finger and done overnight, okay? This is a work in progress, and I've listened to you, all of you, very carefully, and I just want to say that starting with the issue that the leader of the opposition has pointed out a while ago, I will be consulting with the appropriate people, the Attorney General and others. And if it has to come back to the House, we bring it back to the House. No problem. I think that's just the responsible thing to do, right? And I also want to say that, you know, although we have eased up on the seatbelts, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't encourage the culture of seatbelts, okay? So that I agree with your presentation when you suggested that some of the cars that are coming here don't have any seatbelts in the back. And we must find a way to ensure that seatbelts are installed in these vehicles, right? So it's not, this can be seen as a transitional type of thing, but we want to let the people know that we are encouraging the use of seatbelts for both adults and younger children, okay? And I want to say as well that I think there are about 25 tickets that were issued once the new act was in place for children in vehicles. That will be looked at in terms of reversing, taking away those based on what we have put together. And just as I said before, this is a work in progress, and I agree with you that the information system must be stepped up so that we have the understanding and the agreement of the people that all of this is about the safety of our people and our children on the road. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes. Yes.
Is it only as it relates to the child restraint device in the vehicles?
No, it's not.
Okay, that's what I want.
No.
Does it relate to all the provisions in the new act as of February 1st, or just that? And what range of items does this 3-month refers to? I'm not clear on that. Everything. That's what I was asking.
Yes.
Maybe the minister wants time to check to see what
I just want to say, Madam Speaker, that when I referred to the 3 months, it was not confined to the issue that we have been discussing here alone. There are other areas of fine-tuning that we might have to do, And that is why we have allowed a 3-month period that we can look at it. If you have suggestions, please put them forward as well, because what we want to do is to create a more perfect system. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
What about the market people?
Yeah, so Madam Speaker, just on a point of clarity that may assist the House in deliberation. So the Prime Minister has asked that the National Road Safety Council undertake a series of reviews around the implementation of the Road Traffic Act. So we will have our first meeting tomorrow. We will outline a process through which people can communicate so the Road Traffic Act is enforced. But as we go through the implementation phase, we do expect that people may raise issues, as we have heard from the member in relation to whether it be agricultural produce, market vendors. So we will look at broad issues, and then at the appropriate time, we'll make a report to Cabinet, and then we will see if there are any amendments that are needed that will come to the House. No, there's no, so just to be clear, Madam Speaker, the law has come into force and the law is being implemented, right? As you go through implementation, because this is a law that has some new provisions, and also, as we have seen, there are long-standing provisions that are being implemented that unfortunately some people seem to be unaware of, right? When you go through the implementation phase, you can't see some of these challenges until the implementation phase. When you go through the implementation phase, where issues are raised, we will look back at it. Every issue raised doesn't mean that there will be a change, right? But what we're outlining is a process through which those issues can be addressed. So for example, as we have seen, Madam Speaker, issue raised, government acted to make a change, and this government will listen and act.
Announcements.
Laid on it.
The clerk is on her feet.
Laid on the table of the House today are the following: annual report on audited financial statements for the Public Broadcasting Corporation of Jamaica, PBCJ, for the financial year 2009 to 2012. Annual report for the Export-Import Bank of Jamaica, Exim Bank, for the financial year 2020-2021. Addendum to previously tabled report reflecting the period July to September 2022 under the Indicom Commission of Investigation Act 2010. And Indicom report reflecting the period October to December 22, Indicom's Strategic Vision 2022 under the Independent Commission of Investigations Act 2010.
Bills brought from the Senate, petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally.
Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move the following motion. Be it resolved with reference to the sessional select, joint select, and select committees which are appointed in the current session of Parliament, and where these committees have not completed their deliberations, that in the new session of Parliament, this Honorable House be empowered to enable these committees to proceed with the issues referred to them from the stage reached before prorogation. Be it further resolved that the composition of all these committees remain unchanged except where necessary by further motion taken and approved by this honorable House. And be it further resolved with reference to the matters identified below, which are included in the order of business in this session of Parliament, but for which deliberations have not been completed, that in the new session of Parliament, the House be empowered to proceed with them from the stage reached before prorogation. 1, the Partnership General Forms Regulation 2021 Resolution. 2, the Leprosy Repeal Act. 3, the Customs Act 2020. 4, private members' motions, number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12, 13, 14, 16, 17, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, and 33. Madam Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take this motion.
Sorry, Madam Speaker. I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I'll move to introduce and have read a first time a bill shortly entitled the Road Traffic Amendment Act 2023.
Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to sittings of the House. Motions for leave to introduce bills. Presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I now seek leave to introduce and have read a first time a bill shortly entitled the Road Traffic Amendment Act 2023.
Members of the House, the question is for the member to be granted leave to have read a first time a bill shortly entitled the Road Traffic Amendment Act 2023. Those in favor? Those against? There's a divide. If there's a divide, let me have the clerk to call the register.
Mr. Bartlett, Mr. Brown, Mr. Brown, Dr. Brownberg, Dr. Chang, Dr. Charles, Mr. Charles, Colonel Charles. Please, we want Mr. Charles in here. Mr. Charles? No, I can't hear. Okay. Mr. Chin? Mr. Chuck? Mr. Clark? Dr. Clark? Mr. Cousins? heard two answer, member. Mr. Cousins, I heard two answers. All right, in clarified. Miss Crawford. Miss Crawford. Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn. Miss Daly. Miss Daly. Miss Davis. Mr. Davis. Dr. Dunn. Mr. Golding. Mr. Graham. Miss Grange. Mr. Green. Dr. Guy. Miss Hamilton. Miss Hannah. Mr. Henry Kitts. Mr. Henry. Mr. Holness. Mrs. Holness. Mr. Hutchinson. Mr. Hilton. Mr. Jackson. Mr. Lawrence. Miss Lee. Mrs. Malawi Ford.
May I just seek a clarity? Is this the same matter that is being addressed by the Minister Shaw? I'm sorry, is this the same matter? Okay, if it's the same matter, no.
No. Mr. Main. Mr. Mackenzie. Mr. Miller. Miss Morrison. Mr. Montague. Mr. Morgan. Mrs. Nita Garvey. Mr. Paulwell. Mr. Phillips. Dr. Phillips. Mr. Robertson. Mr. Robinson. Mr. Samuda. Mr. Shaw. Mr. Siblist. Mr. Slowly. Miss Smith. Mr. Terrylang. Dr. Tufton. Dr. Tufton. Okay, sorry. Mrs. Vaz. Mr. Vaz. Mr. Warmington. Dr. Wheatley. Mr. Williams. Mrs. Williams. Mr. Wilson. Mr. Witter. Mr. Wright.
Members, the results of the divide, there are 11 A's, 28 no's, and 23 absent persons. So leave has not been granted for the motion to be carried. Public business.
Madam Speaker, I now move Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion, notice of which I gave earlier.
The question before the House is that the standing orders be suspended to allow the member to take the motion, notice of which she gave earlier. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, as stated earlier, that we're asking for support of the motion regarding the sessional joint select and select committees to be carried forward, and right? So at this point, Madam Speaker, I ask for the motion. I ask that the motion be approved.
Madam Speaker.
Yes.
Normally, we would carry over all the sessional committees, private members' motion, and also questions. So I will add to the resolution that questions be added to the agenda item. No.
Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, so as not to prolong this, did I hear somebody say divide?
Madam Speaker, could the clerk just advise, is it normal for questions which have not yet been answered, which have been formally tabled, to be part of the carryover motion?
Normally.
Is that the case or not?
Members, I am advised that the usual practice is that only motions are carried over. So in fairness to the Deputy House Leader sitting this afternoon, she would have to have instructions from elsewhere before she could stand on her own to respond to that.
Thank you, Madam. Madam Speaker, I always take guidance. And based on the guidance, put forward this motion. So
we are having a live broadcast from the Houses of Parliament where the Minister of Transportation addressed the Jamaican people and bus and taxi operators. This is where we say thank you all for watching. Thank you all for joining us. Join us tomorrow at 8 p.m. when Opposition spokesperson on transport, the Honorable Michael Phillips, will be my special guest on the Make We Talk Jeffrey Tavares YouTube channel. That's tomorrow evening at 8 p.m. Michael Phillips will be my special guest. Thank you all for joining us. Goodbye. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.